video 3. This is going to be awesome. We're going to be going through all the stuff we've already done before, but we'll be applying it to the hand and all the foreground elements. So, as I mentioned in the last video, growth through repetition, by doing this over and over, this is how it becomes second nature for us. So in other words, it goes from something where you reference the training, like, oh yeah, let me go back and watch that again so I can apply it here, to something that you ingrain in you and you completely understand it. Through repetitiveness, you'll get it. You'll completely understand it and it becomes second nature to you. So that's something in the live action series we've done a lot, is term one, we go through and create this amazing visual effects shot. But from there, once we go through destroying a building, we decide instead to go and destroy an entire city. So through creating an entire sequence of visual effects shots, we actually go through different scenarios, different shots, but it's all in the same theme. And bit by doing that, you become a seasoned veteran. By the end of destroying 10 buildings or whatever, you become more fluent in terms of what you're doing. And on top of that, you streamline the process. You understand it so well, it's more about, well, how do I make it better? How do I build on that? And how do I improve it? How do I make it faster? How do I tweak things and optimize it? How can I build it into a tool to automate it all? Okay, so that's something that I really enjoy with what we're doing, and that growth through repetition is exactly what we're doing here. We're going to be going through and recreating what we've built much faster and rolling it out for the other parts of the shot. And then next video, we'll be taking all that and working it into the fluids and driving everything else. So bit by bit, we're building up a very procedural workflow and really elevating it beyond what we've done so far. So my big question is, how are you enjoying the training so far? Obviously, it's still early days, but I want you to think about why you signed up in the first place, why you signed up to do this training. Because I think a lot of us, once we get our first job, we think, great, now I don't need to do any more training, now I don't need to improve myself, I can just be on cruise control and continue to work. And that's kind of like getting married and then being like, all right, cool, well, now I'm just going to sit on the couch and not contribute or put in the effort anymore. And that's just how we're going to be working here, is that I want you to treat this the same way, that just because you might hit your goals or learn something new, I want you to continue that training and continue to get better. Because again, it's something that I see a lot. You get that first job or you get that big first win, and then from there it's just like, well, I don't need to work on myself anymore. And I think the best of us are the ones that are constantly growing, constantly wanting to learn and seek new knowledge, but more importantly, we have that growth that we focus on. And it's such a critical aspect to being a better person, being a better worker, being a better technical director, is constantly having those growth, the wins, all the things that we have. So I mention that just because, again, I think it's important for you to realize that whether it's this training, whether it's other training, I think it's always good to consume. And it's also something to think about too, that we have paralysis by analysis. In other words, it's very easy to go on YouTube and Google Nuke tutorial or Google 3ds Max tutorial and get overwhelmed by the amount of stuff out there. And that's why, again, with this course, I'm really enjoying it, because I get to take you through a very guided and very carefully created set of lessons to allow you to consume and learn and go at the correct pace, rather than getting bits and pieces from all over the place and not knowing which you can trust, which ones work. Some things are going to contradict other people's things that they're making. And yeah, so it's really critical, I think, just to have that kind of tunnel vision when it comes to focusing and learning, where it's like, okay, what am I choosing to do? And I have that with the things that I do, with the books that I read and everything that I do. I carefully pick where my time goes, because I've only got a finite amount of time, but there's definitely things that I want to commit to, because I know that the end result is going to be leaving me far better off than I was before I started. And I want you to think about that, what you want to get from this course, what you want to get from this training, so that way, bit by bit, you're going to start asking yourself, and me, if you email me, all the right questions, so that way you can get the most from this. Okay, so that being said, I know it's a lot to take in, but let's get into this video. But it's something just in the back of your mind to think about. What's your goals for beyond these lessons, and what are you hoping to get from them, so that way you can better yourself, so that way you can hit the goals that you're setting out for yourself, especially in 2018. Alright, so let's get into this video. Alright, so what we've done so far is we've managed to create all the fume effects fluids, we've built up the shaders, we've done a lot. Now, as I mentioned in the last lesson, I feel like a lot of this is more secondary effects, and the real hero is going to be doing the water simulations, the liquid, using Max 2018's new fluids to generate some pretty amazing results. Now, one thing I will mention is that the fluid system, this is a new addition in Update 3, so if you haven't gotten the latest update from Autodesk, it's free. Just log in, download and install it, and you'll be good to go. And yeah, like the fluids are really amazing. I mean, essentially this is Naiad, which Weta has extensively used in production for quite a long time on movies like Avatar and a lot of other really big films. Naiad is really just, in my opinion, it's one of the best solvers, if not the best solver out there for doing liquids. I actually know the guys who developed it and sold it to Autodesk. They're still developing it there. You might know it as Bifrost in Maya. And again, it's really solid. Now it's come over to Max. I don't know why they called it Max Fluids rather than Bifrost or Naiad, you know, giving it a new name. It isn't the same workflow as Bifrost or Naiad. I feel like right now the implementation has kind of been just a quick push for Max 2018. So I feel like the solver itself is really amazing. The implementation, I feel, is a little crude and clunky right now. It's usually it's a node-based workflow, and this one is very linear. And yeah, it's just a few things about it. But the solver, like I said, is great, and that's the key thing. Is like if you could have a really great interface, and if the solver, the thing creating all the liquid simulations sucked, then it's going to be useless. So I do think that the future implementations are going to have better interface, things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think that it does do a great job. So make sure you get update 3, and that will then work. Now, one thing we're going to need to do is, so far we've focused on the effect for the face, and as I mentioned at the very beginning, a lot of this is actually going to be more the guy's hands, okay? Because I want his hands also to be affected. So at this point, like, we've just been doing all the look dev on the face, but I want to transfer this over to the hands as well. And it's not that big a deal, but I want to get this out of the way now, and then we'll start to move into doing all the liquid simulations. So the cool thing is we've already done this once before, and I still think it's worthwhile doing something more than once anyway, because through repetition we're able to really have it ingrained. And this is something that, like, with the live action series, I'm kind of always mentioning, is like, like term 2, we destroy something like 15 buildings, something like that, and it's through repetition. I feel like your mindset's going to change from just doing a lesson and then whenever you need to do it again saying, oh yeah, I better brush up on that lesson, I'll go watch it. By doing it enough times, you know exactly what to do, and it's more muscle memory at that point. And the cool thing is, beyond that, you start to experiment and want to experiment more, because you know everything inside out, and it's now more about, like, what else can I do with it? And so I always find that, like, that's the best way to go, rather than doing a one-off and having to watch the lesson a dozen more times. And the worst part is that it's always done in that one situation, so you don't really learn what else you can do. But through repetition in different scenarios, that's where you really get that growth, because you're doing similar things in many different situations, and that's where the real growth happens. Okay, so now getting into doing all the hands, this is going to be the fun part. So what we have is our character man, and what I want to do is clone our character, and we'll call this hands for now, for 1 sec. Let me check what we're calling this. I think it's hands baked texture or something. Yeah, hands baked texture. Put a dash in there. Alright. And so that is our character. Let's drop him into the controls, hide everything else. So with this is exactly what we did with the face. We're going to find a frame where we can separate this all out and set up the mapping for it. If we wanted to make this really easy, we could just do that, and all I did is turn my point cache off. And let's apply an edit mesh. Click select. I'm going to select everything, and make sure ignore back facing's off. Alright, I'm going to select everything, and then I'm just going to zoom in around the wrist. And so that's our hand, and it doesn't need to be perfect. And just something like that, I think will do. And now we can turn point cache back on, and then just, if we want to adjust anything we can. I'm just looking at the top of the hand. That's all I care about right now. Okay, so with all that there, I'm going to put a delete mesh on, and there we go. So these are our hands. I'm going to take this a step further now. I'm going to apply an edit mesh again, select everything again, and this time I'm going to turn ignore back facing on, and I just want to make a selection. Ignore back facing means that typically, and it's not perfect, but typically, yeah, nothing got deselected underneath. None of the back faces, hence the name. So all I'm doing is I'm just trying to get a rough shape of like what I would consider to be the hand. I want this to be pretty consistent. I don't give a shit about the thumb. I just want to do like mainly the hand there. Okay. And so, same deal. And yeah, catch that. Okay, and again, delete mesh. I could just hit delete, you know, if I wanted to, but anyway, at least this way I can kind of see what I'm doing, and of course I can roll back if I need to. So we've got the two top parts of the hand, and what I want to do next is just quickly unwrap them, quickly throw a texture on it, quickly bake all that out. We've been through this before, but the repetition is really critical, okay? But the key thing is that this is the part that we're really going to see. The face quickly gets covered up by his hands, and it's critical to have all that texturing underneath, but this is the bit that's going to be in the foreground, you're going to be looking at, and a lot of the fluid's going to come from. So with all this, now I'm going to apply another poly select. I'm going to select just by element, click this hand. I'm going to align my viewport to the hand, hit UVW map, hit view align, and then let's just type in like 10 by 10 or 15 by 15, just something that's fairly symmetrical. And then poly select again, select the other hand, again UV map and view align. So UV map, view align, we'll do 15 by 15, so they're the same size. Okay. Now, if I were to go and apply a texture to this, we'd be able to see that the mapping works pretty well. The problem with this, though, is that if I were to move the hands around, the mapping is not locked on it. So you can kind of see it's floating. It looks really weird. And that's because the mapping's being applied after the point cache. So the deformation happens down here, so it deforms it, and then it's applying mapping on top. And on top of that, you might notice when you scrub through, it's a little slow. It's not too bad, but it's a little slow. And that's because, again, it's dealing with the entire character, and it's deleting it in real time, applying mapping in real time. So what I want to do next is I'm going to just apply a poly select again, just to deselect everything. Let's point cache this out.
hit new, make a directory like character hands baked to texture, hit save, hit record. Now, once that's done, I'm gonna right click, hit copy, right click again, hit collapse, right click again, hit paste. And all I did is I collapsed the entire stack, and so the UVs are now locked on the model, and then that's when we apply the deformation on top of that. So now this is lightning fast because it's just having to cache out the and move the points around at the top of the hands, and the mapping and everything's applied and is deforming correctly. Okay, so switching the camera view, that's what we get. Now, the next step of this is that we want to quickly go back to Edit Poly. And I'm going to unwrap it. So we say unwrap, make sure it's under the Edit Poly. And then we just do the pelt mapping peel here. Okay, now, while that's still there, we can see one of these is selected, which is good, because I'm going to want to move that selection out of the way, select the other one, scale this down. If this was a video game or something, I'd be a little bit more careful about like not wasting space, but you know, I think it's going to be that big a deal for what we're doing here. Just make sure that everything's within the boundaries. And make sure with this one, unlike the face, let's make sure that we orientate it correctly. So let's just make it point up. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Not my best work, but it'll do. And so, oops, actually with that still open UV editor, I'm going to say Tools, Render Normal. And now we have this, let's just save it out. And then open it up in Photoshop. Okay, so with this active, let's just quickly build a texture. I don't care as much about this. I feel like the face, it's a bit more identifiable in terms of like where it's growing on, but with this we can, you know, literally do what we want. So, oops, sorry. Control Shift N. Okay, so basically we just want to map some textures on here. Okay, so I've got this map here, and let's break it down what we're looking at. I apologize for this. I actually recorded this, and momentary lapse, I guess. I was recording the wrong screen. I switched my monitors around and it picked up the wrong screen. So I'm just going to quickly walk through an overview of it. Originally I was painting it all up and doing everything. So again, I apologize for that. Basically, this is our UVW map. And what I wanted to do is go in and paint where I want there to be like decay on the face, things like that. Okay, and what I've done is break it down to 3 different maps. So I'm just going to turn this black on. Actually, well, I'll try just showing it. So this is the red, which is the outer area. So this is basically the blend between the plates or the footage, the skin. It's blending between that and blending between the actual decay texture. So this is more the outer area that will blend between the two. And then I would have the displacement, which is inside of it. And this is essentially making all the geometry go in, so we're getting depth from that. And then finally blue, which I don't think it shows up when it's added, but we'll go normal for a second. And all this is just a bunch of like points, essentially, and I want to use this channel to specifically create all the liquid coming out of it. So it's going to sit inside of the displacement and inside of all the decay maps, okay? And what I'm doing is making them all add together. So that way we get something that looks like this. However, if I were to look at just one specific channel, red, green, blue, we would only see the red channel, the green channel, the blue channel. So that's why we're making them additive on top of each other. Okay, so linear dodge add, and we're making a black background rather than the UV map. And we'll save that out now, and we'll go into Max and start to apply it. Okay, so what we can do at this point is basically start emitting from the hands. So we have the hands here, and rather than recreate the entire system, what I'm going to do instead is just create a birth texture, and I'm essentially just going to plug this into what we've already created. So I'm just going to set this up to go frame 120. I'll give this a value of like 0.05. I'd rather start higher and work my way down just because it is a slow process. And just quickly add the hands. We'll set the whiteness to a lower value. And I'm also going to go into my material editor, and I'm just going to set the output much higher. Alright, so I'm just going to run that really quick. There we go. So our particles are generated. Now, we have this set up here, and there's two things we could do. We could either just add the lock bonds and pipe it all into one thing, or we can run them separately and just plug it into the mesher, and I think that's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to copy this, get my lock bond, and change that to this guy. Hold shift, bring it up as an instance, bring in the split amount. Sorry, I'm going to do that again. I just want this to be a copy. Split into here, and H test. And the 001, I'm just going to put hand at the beginning. It's just going to make it a lot easier to identify these. So pretty simple. Plug that in, and there we go. So the split amount, I have a feeling that I might want to use less. Let's just say 99.4, something like that. Age test, we can make it come on a little bit later, like 140, but less variation. So that way, because the hands are such a small concentrated area, I want to be careful about that and just make them all kind of appear at once rather than kind of doing it too sporadically. Okay, so turning this on, we can see the sun particles working. That lock bond on the hand. Say restrict. So they are coming on kind of late, and there's also still a lot of them. Yeah, there's a few things that we'll do here. We'll make this a little bit different. We'll set this to be 98.5. I'm not going to use the instant shape for this one. I'm going to set this up as regular spheres. Again, because it's such a concentrated area, I think that we're not dealing with the same issues that we were on the face, where we wanted to randomize it a lot more. So I'm going to turn this guy off for a moment and just focus entirely on this one. And I'm going to set this to geometry. Okay, and so right now there's a lot going on. I'm going to set my size to be about 1.5. Now the thing is, I'm going to get my scale. So let's just go to graph editor, curve editor, and we're just going to pick the hand activated shapes. So we get the right scale, the correct one. And I wouldn't mind extending this to go all the way to frame 150, but let's get this to go a lot larger. So the whole point is that it might start out small, but it'll continue to, sorry, just free up a bit of screen space. It'll continue to expand. And I feel like we can expand even more. So let's just get this curve and bring it up even higher. So they're going to come on a little bit later, but they're going to grow pretty quickly. I almost feel like growing even quicker than that when they do come on. So I'll mention what my values are in a second. I just figure it might be easier just to get what I'm going for and then mention it. But yeah, I mean, even that, so what is this? This is 53 frames, so it scales over 2 seconds, and it scales to 120. Sorry, 170. Okay, so what happens is that these come on and they expand very quickly. So if we were to look at the texture map, and I'll switch to the screen here, you can see that the texture map gets covered up pretty quickly. Now, another thing we could do if we wanted is going back to the birth texture. If we look at the hands for a second, the blue is more centered, so we could actually use that to our advantage. I can go into my birth texture on the hands, and I could literally just use the blue channel. So I'm going to reinitialize that. Now what's going to happen... Sorry, I'm just going to keep this up. Now what's going to happen is you can see that the blue center is where the particles are coming out from. Now we might need to scale this up more because of that, but it means that they're actually coming from those specific pores that we chose, which is kind of cool. So going back into our particle system, again going to the curve editor, hand, scale, because of the, because now it, oh man, everything snaps in 2018. Okay, there we go. So now that they're not expanding out as far, we need the spheres to grow bigger. Okay, so I'm going to try 253, let's try that. I feel that's pretty good. Let's do 370 just for fun. So now, I think it's kind of cool. It's going to start where those blue holes are and expand out, which is kind of neat. All right. So what now? We have the hands expanding out. Looks kind of cool. And the lock bond, we got all that good stuff. Alright, yeah, so let's turn this back on. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my mesher that uses the PFS activation shapes. So let's go into meshers here, and so looking at activation shape, and I'm hoping that's, yeah, it's PFS placement, so not that one. So this guy, activation shapes. So I'm going to add, and I'm going to choose the hand activated shape. Alright, so now our mesher should be working too. So I'm going to change this to dots, and I'm hoping, yeah, there we go. So now, again, it cracks me up every single time I see these weird shapes, but now we can see that all of that's working, and it's plugged directly into the mesher, so it's all working there too. Now, going in here, we have the placement, and we got to do the same thing, which, like I said, it should be pretty straightforward to do this. And so that there, those are activation shapes, and now what we're going to do is we're going to distribute particles over the hands really quickly. So getting the activation shapes, move them over here. We got this guy, so again, I'm just going to do a birth texture, 120, separate, and I'm going to do this one lower because we kind of want more particles to go in there. Fast approximation, and add in here. Now, I'd say we want to emit over everything, so we'll keep it RGB, 120, 65 whiteness, exactly like what we had before, and initialize. So now I just want to look at that and see, okay, yeah, we got a good particle count. I'm going to go to 120. I don't know why. Like we were on, you know, it's set up for 120, but it looks like it baked out on the frame that I was at. But yeah, so that's looking good. Just a lot of particles. I might go a little bit higher so we get less particles. Okay. Going back into pflow, let's do the exact same thing. Let's turn off the cache, and then let's I think keep all of these as is, and I'm just gonna set up, actually, yeah, sorry, I'm just thinking to myself, I'm gonna get all of these and just move them to here, and then make this a send out, because we're not doing any weird custom shapes with this one, at least not yet, as far as I can tell. And so I'm gonna do a send out, link that up, split amount, and I imagine, I don't know, let's just see what we get. So I just turned everything off for a second. This is pretty obvious. So just add into the lock bond the correct particles, otherwise they're going to snap to the other object because they don't know any better. Okay, so now we can see we have all those particles mapped. I'm going to switch to the hands, just so, sorry, the camera, just so we can see this. So we can see all the particles are mapped on there. I'm going to turn on the face as well. And let's turn on the activation shapes. Finally, I'm going to hide my meshes just so we don't have to deal with them. And hopefully, oh yeah, so the other thing that we'll want to do is just going over here. Yeah, it's all going to the same mesher, so that should be fine. And this lock bond is using both. I'm going to say restrict the surface, and I'm just doing that as a precaution, but hopefully with both of these turned on, we should start to see this get revealed over time. And I just turned Mesher back on for a sec. The group selection seems to temporarily have dropped the activation shapes and just added it back in. I'm not sure why that is. It might have freaked out or something, but I'll hide the Mesher and run this again. So obviously the face I can see is working, and I'm just waiting for it to get the frame 140 so I can see the hands begin to work as well. At that point, I'll cache out the particles, and we'll be able to check it out. Okay, great. So we can see that that's starting to appear, so that's awesome. Cool, so I, at this point, will run the particle cache again. And that's the good thing, is like all we're doing is we just added this in, and it's already adapted, so you could literally put this setup on multiple characters, you could do a lot of stuff, just plug and play, which works great. So I'm going to turn that on and hit update all. Okay, so that cached, and just looking at this, everything looks really good. You can see that the original infection spreads, and then it's spreading over the hands. I feel like we have probably too many particles on there. Also, I did forget to turn my split amount on before, but it's set to, what is it set to, 90. Yeah, so I do feel like it is going to overkill compared to the face, which has to cover more ground. So I think we can do it with a lot less. But considering it's just piping into a distance blend texture, I think that this is fine. So yeah, I think that overall this is looking really cool. We can see all the spreading and all the activation, which is going to work really well. So now the hands, the face, everything is activating. Finally, we're in a pretty good spot. You know, obviously this is one of the less fun but necessary parts of the process. So, you know, so far we've been using fume, and we're about to get in the liquid and all that, and unfortunately it's just, you know, we've got that little extra bit of setup to do before we can get to that stage. And so we're almost done with that. Obviously now we need to do two more, a couple more little tiny things, and then we're good. So one is going to our character controls. We can turn all of our effects off for a minute, and let's just focus on this. So we have the hand and we have the character. Okay, and the character actually displaces in. Then we have that particle flow emitter, which was the original. And then obviously we have the character face stuff. So looking at the character face for a second, it's using our blend texture, which plugs into the V-Ray stuff. So just going in here for a second, yeah, I mean, it's all procedural, so I mean, technically if we were to get our hands, get our hand bake texture, right click, copy it, and we'll just call this hands render. We can drag this into our character render and then assign the same shader to this. That's the one with the V-Ray displacement and all that, so this guy here. We turn on our particle systems. And one thing I might just quickly do again, just because we have created a few new events, is just right click, or select and right click on both of these and just turn renderable off. And that will filter through all the nodes and just make sure they're non-renderable. Meshes is off, character controls is off, we just have these two. I turned displacement off for 1 sec, but we'll turn it back on. So here's one thing, I didn't know this and it doesn't make sense, but it looks like if I have the same shader applied to two different objects, it's not really digging that. So I'm going to get my shader, this kind of sucks I got to do this, and say hand shader. Actually, it doesn't suck. There's actually an advantage to doing this. But basically, within this, the V-Ray here, just turn these off for a moment. Yeah, so we are getting it. You can see it on the right hand at least. So it's appearing there, it's just not appearing on the left, which is a bit weird. But the cool thing is at least this way we can set up custom distances for this, so we can get a bit more specific. But yeah, just temporarily, if I just got the V-Ray distance texture and drag this guy out, paste it as a copy, and assign, crap, okay, so temp. So I'm just doing this for a second, you don't need to do this. Oh, duh, I can't assign it to that. Sorry, assign it to the hand. That appears to work fine. So we just got to work backwards and figure out like what's going on. But one thing that I am noticing is that the distance on the hand is a little bit too much. So I might want to put the distance down a little bit so that way it does creep out, but we get, you know, a little bit more tightness around it. And then of course we can break that up. So I'm going to customize this texture a little bit. All I did is I got the V-Ray distance texture and I dragged it down to an empty diffuse slot. And just because the objects, they're all going to be treated, the UV coordinates are going to be slightly different. So I just want to up the size of the cellular to compensate for that. So I think it's 0.01, so making it 0.03 or 1.5. Yeah, so I'm just playing around with this for a moment, but the whole point is that you know, we're able to customize this a little bit, so we might as well take advantage of that. But as that begins to, I might actually keep it at 0.01. But yeah, just kind of playing around with this. We can adjust the spread and everything, so all of that's looking good. I just want to double check, yeah, they are the same. So we have a working texture. I'm going to cut that, go back to my temporary texture here, paste that as a copy in, and so all we need to do at this point is get our shader here. We'll call this face blend or face render shader, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to drag it into an empty slot, and we'll call this hand render shader. And with hand render shader, we assign it to the hands. The big difference is we're going to go to a hand here and copy that, and go back in here. We'll go, oops, sorry, we'll go to our mask, color correction, and then paste instance in there. Okay, so what that will do for us is it will use that mask, and it will use the V-Ray distance texture, plug it into the mesher to drive all this stuff, and that's the result we are going to get. Now, right now, I guess my color correction is using red, 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 and the big difference now that I think about it, damn it, is in Photoshop I didn't set these to red. It's not a big deal. I can go in there and change it if I wanted to, but I'm just going to set this to monochrome. So basically, let me explain. The big difference is that in the other PSD, we set it to lighten. In other words, all the colors are additive, so they all add together. Whereas this one, you have a red channel, a green or blue. So red and blue in this case, and that's all there is. And so there, where there's blue, there isn't red. But if they're additive, they all come together, and that's why you got this kind of extreme yellows and stuff in the other face mask here, because these were additive colors. Whereas this one here, I think I literally just screened the colors on. So big difference. So in this case, if we make them more monochrome, it will use the red and it will use the blue. We won't have those holes inside of there anymore. Okay, so we go. And so that's looking cool. Next, if we go to the head and copy that V-Ray displacement, and this is the cool thing, is we can just literally copy paste, and it works really well. Like, everything we've done is set up correctly. So I'm going to drag the mask of the hand in here as an instance, and then let's check out how that looks. Okay, so all of this is coming together nicely. Now, at this point, you know, we've built the shader, we've done all that. The next thing, one of the last things we need to do is we just need to bake this out so that way we can plug it into Fume, and then it's just literally overriding the sim. So, same deal, we're just going to bake out our textures now. So it might be a good point to save your work. And I'm going to go back into our map here. We can hide the face. I just need the hand, assign it, and then go render to texture. And we still have the same stuff set up from before, so I just need to choose a different output. Well, I thought we had it all set up, but I guess not. So, yeah, just V-Ray diffuse filter map. Doesn't really matter where this goes. This can just be 1K. Make sure the element background is black. Do source baked. It really doesn't matter about the stuff here for this specific stuff that we're doing. Okay. Oops, I don't want to render. So what I'll do at this point, I'm just going to I'll turn that off just in case. It won't make a difference, but I'll keep that off. I'm just going to render out a frame, make sure we're all good. And so with this right now, we just have a mask. We actually need the entire V-Ray shader here. So I'm going to go up and get this entire blend, copy, I'm going to overwrite this guy, paste instance. And this is where we had to do that bake object before. So hands, baked. I'll hide that for a sec. I'm just going to throw the render texture here onto the hands render. We can hide it. I'm going to get the hands baked. Bring that back. Where's it hiding? Sorry, hands baked. So hopefully it's obvious. I know I'm kind of going through it very quickly. But basically all I'm doing is I'm going through the same steps as before. We're just duplicating this object. And this one here, we're just quickly setting it up to bake it all out and plug it into Fume. And it's complaining about a circular reference. I don't think this is the case, but I'm just going to paste it in here and assign it. I think what's happening is that the V-Ray distance texture object might have this texture assigned, so I can either go back and assign that, or I can just do it in here. So I think that's just the easiest way to do it. You know, this is just a temporary thing that I'm throwing on there. Turn our particles on, hit the button, and let's just see what we get. And because this is a new object, I apologize for this. I gotta reassign this. Sorry. It's one of those things when you're rushing through something because you know, I want to keep the attention on point, and so when I'm kind of speeding through something that I know is just not the funnest part, I'm skipping steps here and, you know, not paying as much attention as I should to the fact that, sorry, I'm just going back a few frames, to the fact that, you know, I needed to make that bake texture. So I'll run this again. I just want to go to a frame where we don't have as much revealed. I'm just making sure that this is working good. Cool. And yeah, all that looks great. So, like I said, just 1024, make the background element black, and in the render dialog, just set this to sequence, bake it out, and then we are good. So just choose the output path. Okay, so that has rendered out, and let's just load the material editor and we can bring it in and check it out. So bit by bit, we're building up some shaders here. If I go back to baked mask, I'm just going to drag this. Let me just double check. Okay, so we got something there. I'm going to drag the baked texture down here. I'm going to say hands and load this up. Okay, and just double checking. So it starts at frame 120. So let's go to time. Yeah, and just make sure it's set up there. Okay. Now I'm going to drag this onto. This is hands baked. And yeah, let's just do hands baked. I'm going to drag this on here, show in viewport. And now we can see that we have our effect growing over everything. So that wasn't that painful, right? Like, we have done the heavy lifting. Now that our system's set up, it's pretty straightforward for us to quickly be able to add this kind of stuff in and make it work out really well. So the final step that we need to do with this portion is just going back into Fume, and we got our 2 Fume grids, and we also have the emitters. So with each of these emitters, I'm going to have to right click and clone as a copy, and then hand. We could just add them all in together, but unfortunately they're using different texture maps. So with the hand here, I'm just going to select bait texture, deselect that, choose bait hand, and then under the maps, drag our texture into the map. We can keep the noise, it's mainly just that. Okay, and same deal, add the hand, and then we drag our texture into the map, and then again into there. So we get smoke and color. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. So going back, sorry, I'm gonna get my color, copy that, and paste that back into color. Okay, cool. So finally, I'm gonna run the sims of these. I'm not gonna worry about showing it. We can check it all out when we get to lighting. Obviously, it's plug and play. Again, the way that we've done this, it's great because we can just do that. The only thing I need to do is just make sure we add in the steam hand, and then for the skin dust, make sure to add the skin dust hand. Okay, and we'll run the sim of that. In the meantime, I'm going to move forward because this lesson is definitely more doing a lot of heavy lifting, doing a lot of setup. I want to get on to doing the liquids. That's the part that I'm excited about, and that is what we're going to tackle next.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. Obviously, we went through a lot of the same stuff that we've done before, but we improved on that. We made it more efficient. We did it faster. You might have noticed that this time around you might have been skipping ahead, thinking like, yeah, I already know how to do this. I'm just going to keep moving forward. And I think that's the really critical thing. So at the very beginning of this training, I asked you, why are you doing this training? And as I said, I think it's very critical, so that way you start to prioritize what you want. Okay, I talk a lot about this on my podcast, and a lot of talks that I give about setting goals and all these things that some of us really think are woo-woo, like, why do I need a goal? I need to make more money, that's my goal. And that isn't a goal, because you want something that is measurable. Okay, measuring your bank account is one thing, but that isn't going to measure your success and longevity in your career. But when you start to realize, hey, I want to work in feature film, so I need to figure out like how to get better at lighting, how to get better at compositing, how to work faster, how to streamline my stuff. Maybe I need to code more, maybe I need to learn different packages. Maybe I need to understand this whole integration between CG and live action. All of these things are critical parts of the recipe of building up a successful career. So the more that you're able to consume in the right areas and learn and build that up, the better you're going to be. So I mentioned it just to keep it in the back of your mind, like, what do you want to get not only from this training but beyond that? Like, what are you hoping to achieve this year and hoping to really be able to conquer? We all have different goals, and at the same time I think it's just as important to identify where are the areas that you mightn't really be yet. So not only what have I achieved and where do I want to go, but where are the areas that are maybe holding me back. So lighting might be one of those things, or maybe just having a better understanding of particles and effects, or there's so many different aspects of it. Maybe you think everything's great, but you need that critique on your reel, your portfolio, things like that to know like what you need to include, what to take out, how to make your presentation and your brand a lot stronger. So all of these things are necessary and really critical, and well worth giving some thought into what you want to do and how you want to improve on them. So I'll leave it there. Next video, we're going to be taking what we've done so far, and we're going to be building it into getting ready for the fluids. So we're going to be creating some emission shapes and other things that are part of the process. It's still one lesson away before we get into the fluids, which are going to be really fun, but definitely you can see all this building up. And And the best part is that because we're building it all this way, we're not hacking it together, we're doing it the way that we would on a real feature film production. In other words, when the director or your supervisor came back and said, hey, tweak this one little thing, you don't have to think, well, I've got so many different elements, so if I tweak this one thing, I have to tweak all the others. They're all built and plugged in together, so you tweak one, everything adapts. And that's the best way, because that way you're not having to spend a day to make a simple change. The simple change should be one little button, and then from there, you just render it all out again. Okay, so that being said, I'll be back in the next video. In the meantime, check your inbox. I'm going to be sending you a lot of other really valuable content. And yeah, the next video should be coming in the next day or so, so keep an eye out on your inbox. Okay, I'll talk to you soon.